Hello and welcome everybody, I'm Proud Bavarian, and today we're going to jump into an extremely thankless and really contentious topic, and that is difficulty in Crusader Kings 3. There have been some updates about this, specifically related to game rules. There has also been a little bit of drama, I think it's a couple weeks back now, where the community manager of CK3 found a few, it basically was a quip, I'll be honest with you, in a video that wasn't taken so nicely from a bunch of people, and I have plenty of opinions on this stuff. With this being the year of China, meaning it's a region and an area and just content that I'm not really well versed in, and so that I'm not really interested in until it is at my table, I thought that I wouldn't be doing a lot of these videos for CK3 this year. But difficulty is something that really frustrates me, both in how it is handled from the developers, but also how it is handled by the community. Folks, I want to jump into this, I want to talk about it, and I want to hear your opinions in the comments. This video is not scripted by any means, but it is pretty choreographed. I have a couple of notes on my other screen, and most importantly, I think, I have a lot of relatively well-structured thoughts on this in general. Let's start by discussing the community manager statement in that video. If you are one of the people that are like, I didn't even see that, then, you know, good on you, who cares? Because that's ultimately what that statement is. I'll be honest with you, never interpret too much into that kind of stuff. It was a bit of a quip that he made there where he essentially said, hey, listen, if you have solved the game, you've solved the game, that's just the way it is, and obviously I disagree with that statement. I don't think really that that is a correct statement, but like, who cares? Just move on, okay? We can actually talk about the topic at hand and turn this into something constructive. This brings us directly into this right here. In the latest patch for CK3, and I will actually test this out myself, I might end up playing exclusively on it, who knows, they added hard and very hard difficulty, which add a whole bunch of stuff and functions way more like something that you would see in Total War or Civilization, rather than your classic grand strategy approach. Not to say that it doesn't exist in grand strategy, but it's not too common to have a big focus on it. These new rule sets essentially just give a couple of cheats to the AI and give some disadvantages to the player. Let's take a look at these. First of all, they added Tibet as a nomadic region. Listen, I'm not gonna say anything about this. Let's move on just for the changes for the AI on hard difficulty. You can see right here that, for example, the philosophy behind these changes is to try and compensate for what the AI can't or shouldn't be able to do as efficiently as a player. For example, the AI doesn't change vassal contracts very often, intentionally use abductions to win wars, gain loads of money, use marriages to pull realms into losing wars en masse, or mass construct economic buildings before hiring MAA, to name a few. Changes for the AI. Buying and maintaining MAA is significantly easier, so cheaper. Stress management is improved, so they don't have too many stress breaks. Constructing buildings and holdings is somewhat easier, levies reinforce faster, improving opinion is faster, factions are slightly more lenient, mercenary use is cheaper, court position management is significantly cheaper, not that it currently is expensive, but okay, agents are slightly more willing to join schemes versus players, and so on. Now, for the player, it's of course the direct opposite. Regular mercenaries are more expensive, factions are less lenient, revoking titles and retracting vassals is harder, more vassals are inclined to join tyranny wars, much less likely to randomly become a conqueror, heavier penalties to arranging marriages based on number of existing alliances, marrying with the intent of getting highly skilled courtiers or wanderers to join your court is now much harder, especially if your candidate is not your close family member. Agents are slightly less willing to join schemes, tyranny gained from unfair vassal contracts, etc. is significantly increased. Then, if you play very hard difficulty, all of this except even more applies for the AI in terms of boosts, but also everything from hard, but the bonuses are greater, and AI rulers gain extra advantage when leading their own armies, which basically means they are just magically better at warfare. On the other side of things, we got the player, everything from hard, but the penalties are greater, hostile scheme success chance starts at a much lower level, and knight efficiency is reduced. These are the general changes. We also get something extra here, where the domain limit game rule can now be applied to the player only. Quite nice, you know, it's just like a little bit of a handicap that you can give yourself. These rules existing is not a fundamental problem, but with how difficulty has developed in Crusader Kings 3, I am not a fan at anything being done via game rules that is so quintessentially important to Crusader Kings 3 gameplay in general as balancing. First of all, before we go into the topic of what does balancing look like, what should it look like for Crusader Kings 3, I want to just talk about these game rules. Whenever you add more game rules, this either means that these game rules are now being neglected because you can't actually simulate the game as a developer for every single game rule iteration, which means that if these changes are bad, they will never know internally until it is reported to them, which is fine, I suppose, but ultimately that makes maintenance quite a bit harder. which means either it gets neglected or it takes up a lot of time. Chances are it gets neglected. This is just the way it is. Maybe a little bit of feedback is going to be gathered, and that is it. The other thing, and this is quintessential to the Crusader Kings 3 experience, is that if any of these changes are good, and I think it's kind of twofold, some of these changes literally just patch up exploits that, you know, experienced players regularly exploit, but others just seem good. This right here, for example, clearly just, it's a stopgap measure. Who cares? I've never done anything like this. I've never tried to get highly skilled courtiers into my court. I know people do it, but I'm sorry, this is just a stopgap measure. On the other hand, maybe mercenaries are too cheap, maybe factions are too lenient, maybe revoking titles and retracting vassals is too easy. And if they are too easy, that shouldn't be behind a game rule, that should just be a general common sense change in balancing. Which brings me to the point when it comes to difficulty and balancing in CK3 in general. First, I want to talk about the way it currently is and why it is. This right here is one of my infamous graphs. I've done this for Victoria 3 before, I've done it on the Discord, I think I've done it in videos as well. We will investigate what gameplay looks like over time throughout one campaign, because this is a big issue, and any kind of rules or any of that stuff doesn't change anything, because the general tendency will still be there. What we have right here is PP over time. PP in this case stands for player power, which means what are you amassing, how does that go, and does it just permanently try to up you. The red area is what I would describe the feasibility corridor. In this corridor, what we are looking at is regular gameplay. The AI can challenge you and you can challenge the AI. More often than not, because that is the gameplay loop, you coming out on top. If you are a relatively bad player, you will probably be somewhere down here, but you can still do it. There's more of a struggle, but you can succeed against the AI indeed. On the other hand, if you are a great player, then you should be all the way up here, because yes, you're dominating, but they still have something to offer as a challenge against you. Now the reality here is that some really bad players might be underneath here, which means that their playthrough actually doesn't go all that long. It gets cut off right here. This is where they die, and it's called a day. Obviously that sucks. You want to avoid this wherever you can. If a person understands how the game works, they should be able to be within this corridor. Now ideally, let me just propose this as the ideal setup. The way your gameplay experience should look like is probably something like this. You kind of go up and down. Obviously your power increases as time goes on, right? Yes, you are building things up, your castle becomes better, and so on and so forth. But so do, of course, everybody around you also increase their resources. The reality is that it doesn't look like this. You should be very strong when you have one character, you peak, right, and then you die, you have a couple of issues, a setback, and then you rise again. Maybe at some point you get a dramatic change of circumstances, like the Seljuks appearing, the Gurids appearing, or be it, you know, the Aztecs or the Mongols. Any of that stuff can of course throw you off, but in general, this would mean that we have an engaging playstyle throughout the game. This should be the fundamental goal. However, what actually happens in Crusader Kings 3 right now, and we have this very same problem in Victoria 3, it's very easy to see. It is one of the reasons why in Victoria 3 I stopped building in 1870 so that I don't run away with it. This is what this actually looks like, right? You start out, it's all regular, boom. There you go. You're out of bounds. The moment you leave the corridor of feasibility, all that happens is that you are untouchable for the AI. This happens whether you are great at the game or bad at the game, whether you are experienced at the game or not. It comes from two primary sources, and game rules will never address this, which is why I personally find it frustrating whenever game rules are touted as this great big kind of plaster, this band-aid, the solution. It doesn't do any of this stuff because we have a fundamental balancing, but also a feature design problem. Let's talk about it a little bit. We are here inside of Crusader Kings 3 as everybody's favorite Duke Vratislav II, and we are going to take a look first at bad balancing and then at feature design that makes it so that you will always escape the corridor of feasibility. There's always going to be an escape velocity and you will have a relatively easy time reaching it. First of all, let's talk about balancing. Crusader Kings 3's balancing is not good, because every DLC that releases is always cautiously erring on the side of let's be too powerful rather than underpowered. And I kind of get this, okay? This is where this community has conditioned the developers into going, okay, they're gonna beat the hell out of us if we underdo this, and then we get bad reviews for something that is like, you know, okay, better safe than sorry, I guess. So we're gonna do the opposite. We are going to overpower it. This is something that you can feel especially with the nomads, that you can feel with the landless, that you can feel with Rome, that you can feel effectively with almost every single DLC ever released for Crusader Kings 3. Once these DLC are out, they get rebalanced. But I'm telling you this right now, even in those balance patches, they still err on the side of caution of not wanting to power it too much. One of the really good indicators right there is landless gameplay even now. I don't need to talk much, I think, about my opinion on landless gameplay. I am not a big fan with the iteration, with the implementation. I think it is a shame that it came out this way, and that sounded way harsher than I meant it to be. What I'm saying is, man, it has so much potential and it fulfills almost none of it. But most importantly, landless gameplay, even after the debuffs that it got after its initial release, is still insane. It's ridiculous, okay? I had a hosted tournament, hosted by account. I asked the account to host it. Admittedly, it was in 1178, which meant that we had 3 different things. I think it was 3 different things where I could participate. I won all 3 of them. Okay, pretty impressive, pretty cool. But it's a tournament hosted for free by account. I made, I think, 4,500 prestige and 4 artifacts from that. And with that prestige, all of a sudden, I then made infinite money because, well, if you don't know this, of course, if you have landless gameplay, the higher your level of fame, the better are your contractors. Which essentially meant, yeah, just that one catapult made it so that I was infinitely too strong. There are 2 things that come together here, and that is that grand tournaments give an infinite amount of prestige, and that at the very same time, of course, landless just snowballs, because that's really all you do in landless. We're gonna come back to landless in just a bit. Another thing that I want to talk about in that regard is, of course, the fact that if you start in 1178, where we're currently not, that entire economy is way over buffed, but that is a general problem with the economy. What I'm suggesting essentially is that the scaling of costs, that everything related to, if you take a look at this right here, how it increases through the eras, it's not enough. It's just not big enough that it goes on there. This stuff does not really reflect the cost versus the income that you will have in this time period, making it so that, yeah, you will essentially be in a post-scarcity resource situation. Post-scarcity is really bad. Balancing induced, of course, you can fix it relatively short term, I suppose, but ultimately the reality of it is that unless you have a comprehensive, a holistic approach to balancing and where you want to be on average in the year 1200, 1300 and so on, you will not be able to, well, fill the gaps that have opened up through time. At some point, if you have a game that has existed for now 4.5 years, obviously, you're going to have bad balancing in certain areas. In CK3, it is all over the place. We need a holistic approach to fixing balancing, or things just won't really pan out. The same is, of course, true for, well, the Roman Empire as well. The longer you play here, either you just dominate the empire if you are playing within it, and nobody really can do anything against you, because the snowballing of influence is just that. It is a snowball, and you've become a massive snowball making your way downhill. If you aren't playing in the empire, then you will notice that, yep, there are just folks sitting around with 8,000 influence as you keep playing the game. The balancing is just off. And this should never be addressed just with game rules where it's hard or very hard. It needs to be a holistic approach. What is the intended way to play this game? What is the intended way to be within this curve? If we are not certain about this, if we don't make it clear, if we don't have a clear understanding of this, this curve is incredibly vague and ill-defined even for the developers. And the vaguer it is, the harder is it to get it under control. Let's take a look at this, for example. If we play very hard, this red line isn't down there, instead it would be here, which then in turn means that I just made it so that you have to be within this frame rather than within this one. The difference here cannot be underappreciated. Crusader Kings 3, be it in difficulty or in ease, does not benefit from us making certain playstyles non-viable. You can see this right here in the red area. What I would include here, for example, is somebody that does a lot of wandering. I don't know whether you are aware of the wandering lifestyle perk, or the lifestyle tree I should say. I like it, it's great for roleplay, there are some great functionalities in there, and I actually really like the activities that come with it. The hike, the inspection, and the monument expedition. But in truth, it's the weakest of all of them, right? At least that is what I would say. Unless you are under specific, very specific circumstances, it's just the worst lifestyle tree. What you do if you rebalance things, but only to be very hard, to cater to that particular thing, rather than rebalancing the game to function, is you make it so that having that lifestyle tree falls into this category. Why would I ever pick it? It's non-viable. I might pick it if, look at this right here, I make it out of the, corridor feasibility. Once I'm in a post-scarcity world right here, yeah, sure, I can do some inspections and so on. But at that point, I'm not really playing the game anymore, I'm just doing random things. Settling things with the game rules is counterproductive, because CK3 is not a game where it can be permitted, because it just makes the game significantly worse to kind of neglect and completely deny certain playstyles. You should be able to thrive, not necessarily be at the top of this right here, maybe at the bottom, but you should be able to thrive at the bottom with challenge and so on with suboptimal playstyles. Every time they make it so that there's now a new thing where just something is completely invalidated, right? Let's say very hard might tighten this corridor into just this. I'm not sure whether it does, I haven't played with it yet, admittedly, but my suggestion is if it does, all of this that is now non-viable is a loss for the game enjoyment. Every single playstyle, every single campaign thereafter that I do under those conditions will be within the tight frame of what is viable. This is a net negative, and why I am saying that we need a holistic approach to balancing. I'm not against having these game rules, but this will never fix anything. At worst, it will just get rid of playstyles. At best, I guess, it won't have any significant impact, right, if the cut-in the corridor of viability here isn't deep enough. This is just on the topic of balancing. There are many things that are way overtuned. We can argue about many of the perks, we can argue about a bunch of other things, we can ultimately argue about building tall, and of course we can also argue about legends, we can argue about whatever else there might be. It's probably true, because CK3 has followed a kind of just put it out a bit too strong and then fix it thereafter based on player complaints, rather than a holistic approach to balancing. This is the tirade section on balancing, why I think that the game rules don't fix anything. If anything, they just invalidate certain playstyles rather than the holistic approach that we need right here. The other element runs much deeper, and it is something that I am comparatively crestfallen over, and there are various elements for CK3 that I'm crestfallen over, in particular the simulationist approach. I remember the early ideas that people had, that developers had, and obviously all of this is non-binding, they have ideas, but things change over the years. I'm not content that we're getting proper government types that are unique and only exist for this particular region. I was thinking about something slightly more simulationist, not EU5 or Victoria 3, but still. But let's put that aside, because you can still have a fun game even if you just have bespoke systems that can't really function outside of where they are, the step. Anyway, I think that there is a fear or a certainty within the CK3 developing process that assumes that the player fundamentally cannot be trusted with actual setbacks and actual challenge. And the worst news about this is that I think that certainty, that assumption, is pretty true, which is not good. This right here, if you don't recognize it, is Crusader Kings 2, and I want to talk about one particular DLC for this game that came out and was absolutely maligned. It was hated. People looked at it and said this objectively makes the game worse. You basically buy a DLC, you spend money to make your life harder. I am, of course, if you've played CK2, you will know this. I mean the Aztec Invasions. No, I don't. Aztec Invasions are a great DLC. I mean Conclave. Conclave is a DLC that introduced a function where you had to deal a lot more proactively with your council. This meant that you had to take a look at your council, you had to see what types are they, for example, these are all pragmatists, and then you need to negotiate with them. It was relatively rudimentary. For example, you can buy favors, then you tie them to you, they will vote with you, and you can push through a vote. Effectively, also pretty easy to exploit. You can see right here, this guy, right, is very expensive, 327. If I kick him out for just a second in favor of this random guy, I will only be spending 200. You can bring it down really significantly and make your life easier that way. But let's put that aside. Let's take a look at the way this was designed. This made it so that not only did your council get, for example, votes on, hey, what is actually going on? Are external vassal wars allowed? What is going on with obligations? How much do they owe? What kind do they owe? And so on and so forth. They also get to vote on certain actions. Declare war. They get to vote on this. If you have a council that doesn't like you, these people would buy each other's favor as well. They would do this just as you would do it, and then they would vote against you if they hate you, 100%. That kind of stuff means that you have to interact with these folks for making very, very basic decisions. Revoking titles, for example, included in this as well. Oh, I actually think we might have this. Oh no, revoke title is a council thing. Wait a minute, I wasn't... Oh, I physically cannot revoke titles, that's why. I don't even need to ask them, because I legally cannot do it. Okay, fair enough. It's down there. You revoke titles, and look at that, I would have to take in the council consideration. Most of them vote for it, so I'm going to go ahead and start the vote. Then you can see how it works, right? They vote on it, Boom, it gets passed, and now, yes, it's true, I can initiate this, but they have to agree on it. This stuff infuriated people, but the reality of Conclave is that it added an unbelievable level of depth to Crusader Kings 3 by Crusader Kings 2 by challenging you. It said, we are going to give you more options, more opportunities, especially as a vassal, but you have to fight for it, you have to work for this stuff. And listen, let me be honest with you, a bunch of this stuff was pretty annoying. I most of the time went all the way to like all of this being ruler responsibility, but the council still being empowered, right? Just because it made people happier. But just take a look at this, right? This as a DLC, and this is basically my thesis, I do not think could exist like this in Crusader Kings 3. And the reason is a feedback loop that convinced the developers that players can't really be trusted with difficulty, that most of them don't actually mean it, and that being the correct impression. When Plagues came out in Legends of the Dead, many people were incredibly upset by this, and don't get me wrong, notifications for Plagues were annoying, I agree, but they insisted that Plagues are too harsh, that they are too aggressive, that they destroy too much, that they just aren't really fun, quote unquote. They were wrong. Plagues now are virtually a non-factor. They have been gimped out of existence as the one negative thing that any DLC has ever added in Crusader Kings 3. Legitimacy. It's so easy to fill your legitimacy bar. And when it's not possible for you right now, for whatever reason, I don't know, you can't host hunts or feasts, that kind of stuff, right? It's not that bad to be under the required legitimacy. And yet, this got nerfed into oblivion, because the moment it was implemented, people started complaining about it. I'm not saying, because that will never be true for CK3 as it is without a holistic approach, that this was perfectly balanced. That is not what I'm saying. But those are the only two difficulties that were added in the entire lifetime in Crusader Kings 3 that were legitimate negative disciplines, where you had to sit down and figure out how to deal with them by either deactivating them, by hitting the right legitimacy, or you know, by just dealing with it. And people went absolutely insane over it. With this in mind, I want you to take a look at every other DLC that has come out for CK3. We got the Royal Court. This one basically just buffs you. It is so easy with how the income is and all that to pump this up to the maximum, and then you just get massive buffs. It just gives you positive impressions. Obviously, court artifacts, same deal, right? Culture. There's no responsibilities, no expectations based on your culture, you just always get benefits. That is all it works. You can influence it, you can change it whenever you see fit. You can hybridize with other cultures. And by the way, all of these are great features, but all of them are entirely positive. Landless gameplay literally has no way for you to fail. This man has no way of losing the game unless you are in a position where you literally have your dynasty die out, which is unbelievably unlikely since you can adopt people as a landless character. You cannot get raided, you cannot get conquered, there's nobody plotting against you, at least not really. Your camp followers at worst just leave. That is what they do if they are very unhappy. Nobody can defeat you in a war. Nothing can possibly happen to you. Your troops can't desert, you can't go bankrupt. Nothing. There's no negativity to this. I said, way back when they were rebalancing Landless, because it of course came out super overpowered, I said you can make Landless more grindy, but you cannot make it challenging, because there is no inherent challenge to being a Landless character. Nomads. Your herd growth can literally not go negative. It could do that in CK2, just for the record. CK2 had a worse system for Nomads, I'll give you that right now, don't even doubt it, but the reality is, Nomads almost have no fail state. They are a system designed for you to blob and then either become the Great Khan, and that is the end state of your campaign, or you just conquer somewhere else, right? So you leave this play behind. It is not designed as a gameplay loop that has ups and downs. Yes, there is chaotic succession and so on, but it's just a couple of button clicks away of making people happy, paying them off, and then you're good to go. This is not designed to be inherently challenging. Even when we take a look at something that I like most of these features, just for the record, but the reality is they are not designed with hardness in mind. Take a look at this. In CK2, you have something called Decadence. Let me open it. Muslim dynasties have something called Decadence. There it is. And when you have dynastic decadence, let's take a look here. The amount of decadence these men incur when they are decadent on their dynasty depends on the own social status, as well as the total amount of holdings controlled by the dynasty. Decadence affects the tax income from your domain and the morale damage that domain levies take in battle. Ways to hold or decrease decadence include yada yada yada. If you completely fail right? So if you do not keep Decadence in check, you get a massive revolt that for a player is easy to handle. But you can see the up and down, right? You can see that. In CK3, the way this is designed isn't really an up or down. Here, it gives you opportunities. Over here, it also gives you opportunities. I'm not saying that that is a bad system. Decadence as a system sucks. What I am saying is that Crusader Kings 3 is very careful to very rarely, if ever, present a challenge to the player. And partially, that is the fault of the player base. I'm just gonna say it, listen, I think there is no player base per se. There are very much different niches, different subgroups, people that want different things out of this game. More strategic players, more role players, harder players, more casual players, and I think they all have a place in this space. But the reality is that whenever we are looking at a bit more challenge rather than just another positive coming from a feature, what happens? It has to get nerfed into the ground because people go, this is too difficult to deal with. I've played this game with a legitimacy level far underneath that one that was expected of me, did the world end? I don't think so. I've played with Gavelkind Succession, Confederate Partition, I lost the kingdom and I just let it go. Who cares about Ireland? Good luck to my brother. But people struggle with the very concept of that. Now I will tell you, I'm currently focusing a lot on the player base, but I will be honest with you, I think the player base can handle this. If you just say, hey, this is legitimacy, it is meant to challenge you, I think people will accept it. I think people will deal and manage with it, because that is part of the challenge of a grand strategy game. Which means, in a roundabout and return way, design-wise, I am really not happy that the design of every new system that gets added is there to buff you, is there to strengthen you, is there to build you up and let you basically live your power fantasy. I understand that it is easier this way, but I really, really wish that this wasn't the current apparent, I'm just saying, I'm inferring a lot of this, of course, from how these DLCs have come out, but I am inferring that this is the design philosophy. I might be incorrect, don't get me wrong here, this is conjecture, but the reality to me is, until we get a different design philosophy, until the developers trust that the player base can handle it, which I think it can, but until that is the case, we are never going to get a system that is quote-unquote difficult. Now don't get me wrong here, CK2 is not a difficult game. More than anything, it is obtuse. The UI is much, much worse than CK3. It is not nearly as streamlined. You don't get all the information and they don't tell you where it is. There's no lockable tooltips, there's no concepts to be explained. But CK2 didn't really care about making sure that you get your share of, well, endorphins and, power fantasy from it. They just said, no, we're just going to implement it this way, and that's the way it is. I played CK2, I got murdered. I got murdered in CK2 in a campaign that I recorded just yesterday, that goes live actually, today with this very video here as well. I don't know when I last got murdered in CK3. I'm sure there are many people out there that do get murdered in CK3, but man, it seems to be so rare. So that is one part of the design philosophy that I am personally very unhappy about. The other one is permanence of modifiers, permanence of what you build. When we take a look yet again at this right here, you can see that my ideal curve, and I will defend this curve basically, is the up, you build up your character, you succeed, then your character dies, it goes slightly down, you recover. But all in all, you have this linear approach where you do get better over time. CK3 takes this way too far in my opinion. What I mean here is that too many of the things that we interacted with, that we deal with, just never go down again. I know that there are ways to get development down. There are sieges, there are illnesses, there's raising, there's raiding, yada yada yada. But the reality of it is, when I build it up, it's basically never going down. There's nothing temporary about my development. I don't have a maintenance cost. I don't need to do anything about this. If I take Duke Vratislav II and just invest the unbelievable amount of money that he makes every month, I will keep all of the development, all of the buildings and all of that, even if afterwards I have, 15 years of civil war. Chances are that this county won't get too much worse. The loss just isn't there. There's no cost. Let's say, for example, that Duke Vratislav II generated 20 development points by making trade deals, by going out of his way and getting trade and goods out of Poland, Hungary, maybe Tuscany for something a bit more exotic. And once those trade deals go away, once the trade subsides, all of a sudden, those temporary development points also go away. We get a boost, we go up, we go down again, we can rebuild it, right? Instead, we only go up. Let's take a look at Dynasty Legacies. Dynasty Legacies are not a terrible concept. We had them similarly in Bloodlines in CK2, although I will say at this point I am definitely in the corner where I'm like, I think Bloodlines were more interesting, just because you do more to actually unlock them. First, Dynasty Legacies do not require you to do a certain thing to actually unlock them. Like, to be a rightful ruler, you don't need to have max legitimacy or something so that you can then unlock something here. You just click the button. Secondly, even if I'm a rightful ruler and I have this entire thing, if I am the worst cheater, murderer, whatever it might be, Satanist, right, whatever you want to throw in there, witch, all of these will still apply to me. That is kind of insane in my mind. This feature could be designed differently. Instead of only up, 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 it could be, okay, you have unlocked all 5 of these and you have the potential to use their boons, but you need to fulfill certain character traits. You need to have good traits, you need to be recognized, maybe a certain level of fame or piety is required to unlock it. That kind of stuff makes it so that you build it up, you die, and then you have to rebuild. Let's say, for example, that warfare here only kicks in, or the better ones only kick in, after you win 5 battles, after you win 10 wars, after you, I don't know, suppress 5 rebellions, that kind of thing, right? To me, that would make perfect sense, because I still am better than I was yesterday, but I have to earn it going forward. The way it is designed, that is not the case. Let's take a look at Level of Splendor. Look at this. These are insane boosts. You have to consider the long reign opinion also impacts, of course, how your next heir is going to do, because that goes over into opinion of predecessor. Look at this. These are insane boosts. We can have these boosts, then be a truly horrendous dynasty for the next 200 years, and we still get all of this. Nobody ever says it's actually not that great to marry into your dynasty anymore. You're all Satanists that eat people. It's bad. No. We get these applied fundamentally, rather than having to earn and having a responsibility, because your dynasty has a lot of expectations on you, you just get the bonuses. This is the second design issue that I personally have with the mechanics of Crusader Kings 3. Too many of the things that you get are permanent unlocks, or quasi-permanent unlocks. Like I said, theoretically we could be losing development, but with given illnesses and with a player very rarely getting raided into the mid-game, it's not really something that happens all too often. The same design-wise is obviously true for landless. You keep all of your troops even if you go bankrupt. It's true for the nomads. You keep all of your herd even if you are reduced to just 1 county. It's true for the Romans. You keep all of your upgrades, yada yada yada. The reality of Crusader Kings 3 is that features are designed in such a way that they're only up, 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 and that they are permanent. They're not meant to challenge the player too much. They are meant to open new doors for the player. And that is nice. But it would be great if turning the handle was kind of a challenge for that door, right? So in short, what I'm saying is, I think that unless there's a holistic approach to balancing rather than making it partially harder for tryhards, which, hey, God bless him, and it's nice that this exists now, but it won't solve the issue, we need holistic balancing, and I pray that one day we actually just get a different approach to how these features are designed. It is only up, 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 and most importantly, it never wants to have you encounter a setback, at least as little as possible. And the reality is that this is also reflected in late game. In the late game, you literally, essentially deactivate the challenges that come with CK3. The moment you pick up stuff like Primogenitor, Ultimogenitor and so on, right? Yeah, it doesn't really work that way. When I look at adjacent features that are in CK2, and I don't really want to harp on that for too long, because obviously there's a lot missing that should be reworked into something better, but what I'm saying is, for example, in CK2, there could be a faction that just changes your succession lord to be elective, to be seniority, to be whatever else it might have been, which means that faction has a much easier time to trigger. It can trigger a setback, but it's not going to feel as bad as you being kicked out from your kingdom. Instead, it just changes the odds. It gives you a new challenge to tackle, totally absent in CK3. It's those things where I'm like, I think that needs to be addressed, and until then, CK3, balancing and difficulty will never be a topic. Because as of right now, even if I tighten this curve, that just means I invalidate playstyles rather than having organic setbacks be encountered by you and then overcome. Those are the 3 elements for me that need to be addressed, otherwise CK3 will never have good balancing or an actual challenging experience. I think players can be trusted to be willing and eager to overcome challenges. There should be new challenges introduced and they shouldn't be gimped out of existence every time somebody complains about it. Quite frankly, I think that is kind of on the developers' parts, but also on the community's parts, because it's true. Whenever there is something negative, people go, this is, it's not good, it sucks. My God, live a little, okay? But where this brings me is that this sentence here was really, it was frustrating for me, okay? While we intend to continue pursuing our goal of emergent challenge in the long term, we are introducing these new difficulties for players who want the game to be harder right now. we will never have Emergent Challenge unless these design and balancing issues are actually approached and dealt with. This right here to me is an empty promise, and I don't mean to infer any bad or nefarious intention, not at all. Come on, let's grow up a little here. What I mean to say is, with the current framework, it's literally not viable. It is literally not feasible to introduce this kind of challenge. I do want to stress here as well, I don't think CK2 is too challenging. Like I said, I think it's just obtuse. I played CK2. You know what, let me just open this real quick. I played this CK2 campaign just because I wanted to dive back into CK2, take a look at it. I'm gonna do an HIP playthrough as well here, just a one-off, right? I was just playing this kind of second-handly. I was, you know, just doing some nifty stuff, some random stuff. I tried to reform Norse. That's not gonna happen because of moral authority. Who cares? That's fine. I created the horses. I'm married to one, or I'm gonna be married to one. This game isn't hard. Look at how much I've blobbed. It's 902. I could have definitely done it faster. I just didn't prioritize this. And this is with defensive pacts. This game isn't that challenging. But this game does say, hey, I'm not gonna hand this to you just by you initiating it. I'm gonna have you have a set. Your relative, for example, was killed. This guy, Siegfried here, was a great king, only 48. He was killed by somebody. I don't actually know by whom. You know, let me double check this. This is spoilers for the video that already went live on this, but I don't know, who killed him? Who the hell are you? She was, oh, in this playthrough, I had actually force vassalized Sudrea, so, okay, she was mad at me. Fair enough, I understand. I haven't been killed in a while in Crusader Kings 3, and maybe more importantly, or definitely more importantly for me, there are so many lateral moves that you can make in CK2, so many small buttons that you can press. I created a Merchant Republic, I had a mercenary band that was basically tied to me, right? It was my obligation to pay for them, that kind of stuff. I am missing that in CK2. And I really wanted to come back, because I can put both of my hands behind my back and still have fun in the game, but it would be great if it was an organic capacity of the game rather than me kind of forcing myself into it. The last thing is as well, I think one of the things that put off the developers of putting in more difficulties and such, and I think it was the wrong approach, just for the record, but if you recall, there were harm events. I've started playing with them again. Let me check them. Where are they? They added these random harm events, right? Random death or disabling events are much rarer till they aren't. These were disliked, I think, basically by everybody, mostly because the way it worked was that you just get an event and then you're done. It just kind of feels bad. It is different from being killed in a plot, because in that plot you have a string to follow. You can find people that you can blame for this. You can make sure that you can punish them. There's a new challenge arising from this. I think standalone events like this are not great. I even personally think Great Conquerors are not great. I don't hate them, but they aren't emerging because of their society or because of anything else. They are just emerging because the game was too easy, I guess, right? Like, I know that there are requirements for them, of course, that kind of stuff, but it's different from a Seljuk invasion, it's different from the Mongols, it is different because it essentially just says, yeah, the game wasn't really balanced enough to give you native opposition, so here's this. We need way more systemic, way more emerging difficulty, and it won't be possible unless balancing and of course the design principles that I think are bad for the game, if they are even true in the eyes of the developers, until they are addressed. Let me know what you think about this, whether my analysis is correct, whether it is incorrect, whether you agree or disagree with me. For me, this is a really sore topic, because we're going to have a wider game at the end of this year, and I know that a lot of you, and I'm actually kind of surprised, but I'm very happy for you, a lot of you are really excited for China, and I get that, but it's not going to make balancing easier. It's not going to make a design philosophy easier that tries to push you around. CK3 is weirdly enough the most padded out game, by which I mean that you can fail and still have a great time. You don't need to cheat like we did it back in the old day, where we put ourselves into the Rise to Power mod, or where we put ourselves into like a tiny county somewhere. No, you have mechanics of being landless, of coming back, of doing cool things. And yet, CK3 is also the game that trusts you the least to use those tools, to find them engaging, to come back on with a vengeance, right? And that's disappointing. Let me know what you think. I'll leave you right here anyway. I hope that maybe at some point this gets addressed, but right now, especially with these rules being these band-aids, it is what it is, okay? Let me know what you think, and I'll see you later, alligator.